Okay, well, welcome to Watercolor Studio 50. I'm looking at the clock. Watercolor 42, not 52. So anyhow, Watercolor Studio 42, and this afternoon I'm going to be working on a picture. I wish I knew what state this particular mill, this old mill, is located in, but the title of it anyway is called a rolling mill, a roller mill. And it's a very typical type of mill that you'd find near the source of water. Back in those days, you know, they always had to have a source of water to turn the water wheels and so forth, and go over the dam type of thing. And so this happens to be one of those types of mills. If there is a water wheel, it's not in the picture. It's probably on the other side of the building, over and back somewhere. So what I've been doing here, the particular picture is a photograph, and they used to use like brown film, sort of a monochromatic color of brown. And brownie film, maybe, I don't know what they referred to it as. But anyways, this was a photograph taken, the composition is pretty well all set. The composition is there, it's located. So all I have to do is I add a few lines. Now what I do, lately I've been using a marker, and I've been kind of using relatively straight edges, you know, just using the ruler. And in a few cases, I just do freehand a little bit without using the ruler. But for the most part, I kind of get some of the outlines and so forth down with the ruler, especially the roof, you know, the pitch of the roof and all that on buildings. The trees, you can kind of do that at random. Just make sure everything's connected back to the main body of the tree. And I always put 3 of something in there, that uneven number. So I'll do the same over here, just put a couple of trees in the background here, just show some of the trunks of the trees and whatnot. And there's a little bit of detail along the edge here. You could probably show some bushes and whatnot growing. But I don't spend an awful lot of time on the drawing itself. About maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And sometimes you can do a small little thumbnail sketch, like the size of a business card. You can do something like that ahead of time. And that helps you get down a little bit the different value ranges from what's really dark in the picture and what's lighter. Of course, it's always the sky that's going to be a little bit lighter. So I might do this a little bit like a monochromatic color today, just using some of the beige colors and softer colors. See how that works out. And the light areas would be the white of the paper that would show through. In this particular picture, because anything that goes over the edge, any type of a man-made waterfall or natural waterfall, just as soon as the water drops, it aerates, you know, and it looks lighter, whiter, whatever. And so this particular scene here looks like it's a fall scene because it doesn't have to, there's not many suggestion of leaves on the trees, but I may kind of dance around a little bit and add some leaves to the trees, okay? So like I said, I'm going to try to do this a little bit more like well, I'm going to say one color, monochromatic type of color. Okay, now, usually any outdoor picture, I always start off with a little wash. And I just wet the paper just with water up here in the upper area where the sky would be located. And we'll just see what we can do with it. Now, if I do a wash today, I'm just going to use some lighter colors. Probably mix a little bit of raw sienna with some of my brown and sepia, so forth, some of those darker colors. But here we go, just putting that wash in. Now, having said that, I'm going to just add a little bit more tint to the sky, a little bit more color in there, and see how that works out. I started with some raw sienna here, and now I'm working some of the darker color is using some of the sepia dark brown that I have. Okay, something like that. Now, if I want that to be a little bit lighter, I can just put some clouds in the sky just to make it a little bit more interesting. In the photograph, it's just sort of an overcast brownish color. I almost said gray. You always think of the sky, you say, oh, it's a gray day. But this happened to be a brown color. So I'll just touch that up a little bit. Let's go across the top a little darker. Just up in here. Okay, there you go. Pull that across. And wherever you see that shade, maybe somewhere else, we could take some of that color, dash them in here on the side, maybe up and back here, where some of the woodland would be. Now, very seldom do I do monochromatic one-color paintings. Very seldom. But this particular photograph is using that type of film, out of a brownish film. I think they used to do movies years ago, all in brown, before they got really into Technicolor. Boy, that was a big thing when Technicolor came along. How about sound? way back, introducing sound. Seemed to me, I can remember sound being the first movie was one of the Al Jolson. He was a very popular singer in those days. And I think he did one of the first sound movies, singing and whatnot. That was really something, though, huh? When they introduced sound. I'm not sure that the date, what year, but it was back there. Let's see. What I'm doing is just some of these little shades in here. These are just base colors. You know, you start off with sort of softer base colors. The water here seems to be fairly smooth. Looks like I picked up a little bit of my Payne's gray. I cheated a little bit, huh? Added a little gray to it. All right. So here we go. Now, what I do, and I always tell people that I usually don't particularly finish any one particular area first. I kind of jump around a little bit and make sure I get a lot of paint, especially towards the edges, because I do mask that in to make a false matte type of white around. So I have to make sure that I work all the color back to the where the tape is. And then towards the finale, I just pull the tape off, and it looks like it has a white mat around the picture. Now I suppose I could go just a wee bit darker there. Oops, maybe not that dark. Let's put some of that sepia out here on the edge. That's really dark, so you have to be careful with that. You don't want to get that in there too soon. I could go a little bit darker in here. I know underneath the building, the mill, I'm just looking at the photograph here. It's darker. There's going to be darker back here. Now, when you do a painting, there's it's always darker underneath the base of everything, underneath the bushes, underneath the trees. It's always going to be darker, especially if it's during the season like summer when all the leaves are on the tree. The leaves act like an umbrella, blocks out the sun, so everything underneath, whether you're doing flowers or plants, it's always going to be that darker color underneath the base of the trees. And then off here in the background, of course, as the trees reach for the sun, the sunlight comes in, and it's always going to be a little bit brighter, lighter color, lighter shades of green. In this case today, I'm doing this monochromatic type of thing. And so now all I'm dealing with is really lights and shades of a brownish color. Okay, here we go. I'm looking for the dark areas. Sometimes I have to wait and let an area dry before I come back into it, because otherwise it's just going to keep bleeding out. So let's put some color on the side of the building, right up in here. I guess the light source in this case is coming from my left to right, from the left side. Sometimes I put a mark on the tape. Just put a mark on the tape outside here. Just an arrow, just to remind myself where the sun's coming from. Maybe another arrow in here, just to remind myself where the light's coming from. Because, you know, a lot of times you get caught up in your painting and, gosh, you forget all about, where's that light source coming from? Where's shadows? You know, where are they going to go? What side and whatnot? So you probably might find a little darker area right down in here too. Right across there, in that little pocket there. And maybe as you come across the water, there's going to be a little bit of a cast shadow. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's sort of in the picture, yeah, in the photograph. It's a beautiful photograph. The composition really, the one that took the picture set it up so that the composition comes out just perfect. So the artist, I look at it, I don't have to move a tree or this, that, or that, or around. It's already pretty much in place. Sometimes they'll put a tree that's divides a house or something right in half, so you have to be careful of that. You don't want everything to be too symmetrical. Now that's a little bit dark in that corner, but I'm just going to lift that out, pull that across, pull some of that watercolor across here, blend it in. The water can have all sorts of different shadows on it, and of course reflection as you go along. Now, for the most part, the roof is going to be kind of light. There's just a little bit of a shadow, probably here, on just slightly, and then right underneath, right here, this is going to be under the eave here. It's going to be quite a bit darker there. I'll just put that line in there for now, shade that down. But that's just to remind me a little bit. Now the windows can be a little bit wider, but you know when you make windows, you want to make them purposely elongated, because if you make the windows not exaggerated, sort of longer, you know, tall or whatever, they from a distance they look like dots, little squares, and the dot looks round. And So it looks like you don't have a window there too much. Now, today this painting is going to be easier because all I have to do is look for the shades, different shades, mix my brush, put the color into that particular area. I don't have to worry about one color running into the other because predominantly the whole picture is going to be sort of a brownish beige color. I can start going darker in different places. But when I do that, like I said a few minutes ago maybe, that you have to let certain areas dry before you give it another coat. Otherwise it might, run too much. See how that might stay there. Might stay there. Might. I'm not sure. But anyways, if it doesn't look good, I just erase it, take it out, or blot it. I got a piece. Well, I'm going to put that one aside, take a clean one. You can blot that paint, picked up that color a little bit, and I can pull some of that up into here because the trees are always going to be darker underneath, around the base. So that can always go darker in through here. Okay. I'm going to kind of take some of that out. Erase some of that. I don't want it to be too busy with all these little brush marks in it. So you just use your brush to paper towel, pick up some of those wet spots. Yeah. All right. Come across here. There's going to be some shadows on the side of the shed here. We'll just fill that in a little bit for now. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I'm just kind of jumping around a little bit. Oh yeah, there's a building back here. So to make that building show up, I'm just going to put a little bit of an outline, darker shade in there, just to make that show up better. And then what I do with that shape is just pull it back, take the edge off, and just pull that back. So it doesn't look like another building or another shape in there. It just looks like the background blend of the color of the tree. See how if you go dark against the light area, it just makes that show up like the roof or side of a building back there. And then that little drop there, from right now, it looks like some sort of a bird's nest. So what I do is, if I don't want that to show up as much, I just erase it. You can erase everything with water, with watercolor. I think that's what makes it kind of interesting to work with watercolors. You can kind of blot it and lift it up and so forth, clean it up a little bit. Right now the darkest spots are a couple of places here, but all I do is look around in the picture and I try to find where there are some darker areas. I know it's going to be real dark right under here, right underneath the building there. That shows up, and I think right under the eave here, that can kind of be brought out a little darker too as we go along. Now see what else we have here. Okay, there's something else in here, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a little bit of the edge there. Let's just make that darker there. Come down like that. And you could just take a little bit of that edge off. If you don't want it to look too sharp, I just soften the edge, pull it back in, and if I want to keep that edge the way it is, I don't touch it. You can go under here a little bit more. Now, for the most part, I've been using the same brush. In fact, for the whole picture so far, I've been using a pretty good sized brush. And that's one thing you have to keep in mind. I think when sometimes people start off painting, one of the things that they tend to do is start with too small a brush, because I think they're afraid to use a larger brush. But the larger brushes have a pretty good point on them, even though they're hold more moisture, more paint. They have a good point as long as you don't press too hard with the point. I'm just going a little bit, doing some shading off in the background here. I want that to show up a little bit more here, so I want that back of the building to show up, so I'm making that a little bit darker there. Now, these things, the brush strokes that I'm putting in, I'm kind of keeping the edge clean, but what I'm doing is taking the edge off here, because in the picture it looks like everything kind of blurs out, you know, off in the distance. So I can take that and just pull that back up in the air and fill that in with more trees, the textures of tree branches and so forth. So I can go way up into here, way up into there, whatnot. As we go along, we kind of look at the picture, see what needs to be done, see what needs to be brought out. The bank here, we could certainly do more with that. That could be darker through here. Now you don't want to keep that hard line, so you just pull that back up before it can dry. You just take that and pull it up. And you might want to show a little bit of a cast across the water. A little bit of that color reflection, just to break up the water. Let's see if but the water, you know, you have to kind of keep it kind of flat, going kind of one way. You don't want to make it look too, and you can show a little bit of the contour of the landscape in there, maybe a little bit coming out that way. I certainly will be cutting into this too, to make it, this is all supposed to be water going over the edge of the fall here. This can have a little bit of shading in there. Take some of that out, yeah. So you can see how you can kind of work this painting. Again, I'm working around, I'm not working on finishing one particular part of the picture. I'm just working around that. Okay, let's see what's happening up there. Not much going on up there in the photograph anyway. Okay, just that. Make that a little darker towards the edge anyways, towards the tape, so that when I pull the tape off, you'll have more of a contrast between the painting and the manufactured matte there. Okay, so let's see where we're at here. All right, I'll probably do a little bit of a shading in the windows. Just touch them up a little bit, bring things out. Definitely more shadow down here. I'm just working off of the colors. I got the raw sienna, and I got sepia, and I got Payne's gray. I kind of kept that a little bit separated from the others. It's going to be a little bit darker through here, right in here. Maybe this can be a little bit, the whole thing can be shaded down in here on this side, and that would bring that corner out a little bit more. Pull it back. Okay, there you go. And looking through here, my trees, I can wiggle the brush around through there, get some more color back up into that. It can be a little bit darker, maybe not that dark, but nevertheless, we can take some of that out of there, move it around down through here. And what I've got also, I put a lot of water on my brush here, so I can push that around a little bit more. Go up in here. You could change that a little, put some soft color back in there, break up that area. This has to be probably more solid through here, so let's fill this in more. Now once you fill in the background, that makes the building show up a little bit more, which it does. The building's supposed to be lighter. Okay, I gotta be careful. I got a few puddles going here. Pick up the puddles. Now, if you want this edge to kind of disappear, you just take your brush, get most of the paint out of it, and just have water on the brush and just soften that background in. See, blend it right into the sky area. That's one thing, like I said about watercolor, you can do a lot of lifting of the color before it dries in too much. I don't want that speck there, so let's take that out. There you go. Okay, let's do a little bit over here. I think it's coming along pretty good. Now, definitely, I need to get more shadow in the side of the building here, because this is definitely on the whole thing's in the shadow here. Let's wiggle around here. Pull that around. Come down this edge a little bit more. If that gets a little bit too dark, I can always take the brush and get a little bit more water on the brush and kind of pull the paint around and make it get a little bit lighter there. This side here, we can kind of keep that pretty light. You might want to just quiet it down a little bit, but not much. Just wiggle some of the water around. Okay, take that down. That shed roof, you can have that show up a little bit. Okay, now, what I'm doing is kind of holding off a little bit here because remember I mentioned some areas when you paint in, you want to make sure it's drier. So I'm letting the paper dry a little bit before I come in with another shade. This is a little bit light here. In the photograph, this area is darker. Let's see if I can do something more with that. I don't want to get it too dark, but it can be darker through here. Okay, yeah. Again, soften it out. Just water on the edge. Something like that. See how that works? Now, I haven't done anything with the water yet. I'm just working on the trees around the background here. You see how if you let it set up, the water doesn't move much. So sometimes you might have to wiggle the brush a little bit and get that water and the color to blend in more. It is darker through here. Right in this area, it's a little dark area. There's darker patches right down in here too. Got to counterbalance one side with the other. So, having said that, see if I can get some more darker color into here. I don't want to hide some of my marker either. I want that to show up a little bit more. Or have it stay so it shows up a little bit more. Now when you do the waterfall, that's quite a bit lighter. So when I put any brown or something into that, I'm just going to push up from the bottom like this. Just push it up into there. Now, realistically, the water's coming down over the edge. But what they tell us to do when you do water cascading from a waterfall is to take the paint and push up into it like this. Like that, from the push up from the bottom across here. Push up, push up. And it should be a little bit of a spray down and through here. Now, if I've hidden that too much, I can always come back with some of my white. I brought my white with me today. I can always add some white into that to make it look like, you know, the water being agitated a little bit there. Let's do across here. Just push up into it. And going this way. Something like that. Now, you might want to show just a little bit more contrast. I got a little bit of the Rossiana kind of coming through, so if you don't want to see so much of that, you just hide it. Give it another coat, and we're going to push some of that foam up from here to use some white for that. Okay, this looks a little bit too light on the roof, so the roof has to be kind of tinted, softened down a little bit more. When I sketch this, I have some pencil lines in there. You can erase the pencil right through the watercolor, but you don't want to erase it while the watercolor is still wet. You wait until it's real dry, and then you can use a gum eraser or whatever, magic rub eraser, and you can kind of take some of that out. Let's see what's happening down on the back end here. I think I can quiet that down just a bit down here. Might have to take that down a little bit more. Okay, now some of the fine markings here. There's some other little markings on the building. I'm going to put those in with a marker though. I think I'll just draw some more of that in. But if you use a marker, like a Sharpie marker, it's a permanent ink, but it doesn't work good on wet. So you have to let all that wet stuff dry before you do any more texturing with any other pen or marker or whatever you use. Let's go a little bit more in there, more texture in here. We'll make this darker. I'm going to make this darker coming out of the corner too. And spread that over into here. Let's see. Now sometimes you could take, if it's wet, still wet, I take one of my pieces of cut up pieces of plastic credit cards, and you could scratch into this and put some texture of like branches and things into the paint. You can scratch into it. If you want something to show up, you can just scratch into that. You know, create more texture. I'm looking across here. There's plenty of texture in this, believe me. By the time you get through, you've got a lot of texture there. Okay. There's a little bit of discoloration on the bond. Now, I've been using the same brush. I can go to a little bit of a smaller brush here. Or even you use a marker. I'm going to use a flat brush too, flat on the bottom here, and see if I can do some other things. Oh, another thing too, you can take the credit card and you can take that card and you can cut into the paper so that when you put the paint on, what happens is the paint, the color, settles into those scratches and makes them show up more. I'm doing that now over here. I don't know if you can notice it. It's probably hard to see it on TV, but you can make some more scratches of bushes and stuff on the side here. There's plenty of texture that you can put in. And we'll put some more discolor, little coloration in the water going over the edge here. Now, if it doesn't, it's not convincing enough just yet, you can kind of define the edge here a little bit more. I can go along here and probably break that up a little bit more here. Whoa, I don't want to go that dark though. I don't think. Not right now anyways. You can show some more texture there along the edge of the building, maybe a little bit more into here, right underneath there. I don't want to make it look too busy, just a little dark, just a shadow there underneath, right along that edge. And like I said, you can take your brush and you can take some of that color out if you want. Just add a little bit more, break it up a little bit more into there. Now, looking at the picture, we get some more shadow back in here, a little darker. Let's make that a little darker too here. A little bit more back here. Take that edge off there. Define the building back here a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more darker color in there. Now you can put more texture out into here too, into the tree portion. You could break that up a little bit more. This definitely could be darker down into here, down across the bottom there. And the whole building itself on this side, I'm just kind of letting it set up a little bit more. So I don't want to keep painting wet into wet into wet. So here we go. Come across here, break this up. Whatever you want to do with that. And anything that you want to show up, just put a little bit more darker color up against it. You want that to back of the building to show up or whatever. Or you want to put more trees in back of the roof here, make those show up. Let's take some of that out over here. Not quite as, don't make it quite as busy. And in here, let's soften that up a little bit more. Okay, and clean up a little bit across the edge of the roof here. So, now, so when you're doing a monochromatic, most predominantly one color, it's just a matter of making things show up better just by the value. Keeping certain things real light and certain things real dark. You can put some more dark in through here, right down to the edge. But then, like I said, you still have to take and pull some of that back out too, soften it out at the edges. A little bit of moving around here, jumping around. But the thing is that if you want certain things to contrast, you do have to let certain areas dry better before you try to go on. Yeah, put something a little darker right on that edge there. Right in here somewhere. Maybe something like that. Make that show up. So as you look at the picture, the photograph, you're just picking out certain areas. Now if you want something to show up more or to take something out, you just wet it and blot it. I gotta take another piece of towel. That one's getting a little bit messed up. Oops, got some tape in back of that. Okay, let's make this a little bit more noticeable. Make this darker in here. Certain edges I like to keep, so I don't tamper with those. I just leave them, let them dry in. Maybe this could be pulled back a little bit more up into here. Take some of that out. Lighten that up a bit. Now, my particular mill here looks like it's kind of it's a newer building, so I haven't kind of broken it up too much to make it look older. They've kept it up. Looks in good shape here. Okay. I have to pull back a few edges. Now you could kind of break it up a little bit more. Put a few more shadows in there. I didn't want to do it too soon because they start blending in too much. You see something, you can leave something like that in there. Maybe something under here, more. That type of thing. Let's see, in the water. Okay. Now, what I do a lot of times, I take acrylic white. I don't use the Chinese white, watercolor white. I use a little bit of acrylic paint and touch up a few little spots here and there. I think I mentioned earlier about something about you might want to leave a little bit of white water across. Go for a little fine brush, hiding somewhere. But okay. Maybe I didn't put it in with this batch. Sometimes I don't get the brushes back in where they belong. Well, we use this little guy here. We're going to take a little bit of a white acrylic, and right across the bottom edge, there's going to be a little bit of white water showing up. So you could put some of that white back in there. Put some of that across the edge. Now, acrylic paint is a little bit thicker, so you may have to water it down a little bit to make it stretch out. But you can lighten up an area. Make it look like more white water there. And anywhere in here you can push up and break that up too. If you want to make it look like a little bit more of a white water, just put some white back in. You kind of push that up a little bit. See along here. If it's too hard an edge, you can soften the edge, make it look more like, you know, the spray coming up. Add a little bit more texture to it. So those are the little touch-up things you can do if you have to. Now going over the edge, if you want to bring that out a little bit more, right on that edge, we just add a little, just break that up, soften that up a little bit with a little bit of white, right as it goes over the edge there. Put a little bit of white in there. And like I said, as things dry down, you can always add a little bit more. I'm going to push a little bit more. If you wanted this trees to look more like summertime, just push some darker shade in there for texture. You know, suggest maybe some leaves on the tree. Otherwise, it might look like a tree that's just dying, dead wood. Yeah, just break that up a little bit more. This can be over here. This can be a little bit darker. You can do that. Let's see. And break that up a little bit more. Soften the edge down. Okay. Now in here, this is heavy through here. So what I usually do before I finish up, I make it a little darker across the base here. Push that darker color. Let's get a little bit more paint on the brush here. And you can push some darker shades into this, just so it gives it more of a base. You don't want everything to fall off the edge here. So I just strengthen that up. And just, water's fairly quiet here. And so you don't have to have too much white water into it. Yeah, something like that. It's a little stronger across the bottom edge. See, it's that sort of holds it up a little bit more into that area. So, anyway, now, like I said, you can use a fine tip marker, and you can come back in and add a lot more texture. But I wouldn't do it just yet. I wouldn't try to put too much texture in. There's plenty of texture to make the, you know, the siding, a little bit more of the siding on the building. I think that I could quiet this down a little bit more too. A little bit of light in through here. Just add a little bit more color into that. Take that, push that under the eave there, but then what you want to do is just pull that back down. Just soften it out. But you make the building look a little bit older, weather beaten, if you will, whatever, and break that up. But I would do that more with the marker before you finish up. How we doing in through here, okay? Now if I wanted to make any of this lighter, just take a little bit of your acrylic here and just give it a little dash, see? Just soften it up through here, like that. This might be still a little bit light there on the roof, now that I look back at it. So that can be kind of tapered down a little bit. It doesn't have to be that bright. I left a lot of little white patches in there too. but you can start adding some texture. Once it dries, you can do more with it. I think one of the biggest problems, and the one we don't deal with as much, is the drying process. When you're working on the surface of something, let certain areas dry out first before you start doing something else, you know, putting some other layers of paint in there, whatnot. Let's see how we do it on time. Not too bad. Well, this, like I said, let it dry, and then if you want to come back with a smaller, you know, markers, they have some smaller fine-tip markers, or even those little pens, you can kind of put more texture into it. I use a straight edge ruler. A lot of times I just use the ruler, just, you know, go across and put some lines in it, texture. You probably might want to do a little bit more with the water here. Sometimes I take my fingers and kind of blend it in. But you can do something like that. So for now, before I take the tape off, I'm just going to make sure that I've used my paint right to the edge of the tape. And if it looks a little bit white there, just fill it in. Fill it in with your brush. So you have some contrast with the white of the paper there. That makes up sort of a false matte for your artwork. There's still some work, but I would probably let that set. You could even let it set overnight and look at it again tomorrow, and you'll see exactly what you want to add to it. You may want to add a little bit more shape to the windows, a little bit more texture of the branches, a little bit more ground texture, bushes, leaves, whatever it might be. Maybe a little bit more shading. You'll see, when it dries out, you'll get a better idea what needs to be done. So I guess I've gone over the edges okay. A little bit up in the corner there. And I think probably, if anything, I need a little bit more weight here, a little bit more counterbalance. So let's add a little bit more color down into here. How's that? That's a little bit too dark, but we can just erase that, blot it, or spread it out. Yeah, something like that. But it just needed a little bit more oomph there. And you can still work on it later on. After it dries, you can see where it probably needs a little bit more shadow. Okay, so I'm going to leave it for now like that. And I'm going to try to get this tape off. I've been trying to get the tape so I can bend it back, the sticky side, so that it will pull off easier. That came off pretty good. Let's see what else we can do here. This one on top. Yep, sort of. There you go. Supposed to tear it on an angle so it doesn't damage the surface of the watercolor paper. 45-degree angle like that, not just straight. There we go. And here's this side here. Now when you're first starting out, I don't know if you want to start out the way I was doing, but you can do a lot of this with a permanent marker, and then just fill it in pretty much like you would a coloring book. You know, filling in the picture, and so I kind of save room for my signature there, but it can be a little bit darker across the bottom. It gives you an idea what it looks like. Again, it still needs a little bit of cosmetic work. I would wait and let it dry a lot better overnight, and then you can touch it up in the morning with, like I said, a fine pen or whatever. And where I use predominantly brown, probably could use a, you know, like a brown marker or a pen. I've got this one. Might be a little bit wet, so it doesn't work very well. But that gives you an idea what you be able to do. So time's up, I guess, so brush it up, and we'll see you next week, or whenever.